Well, a lot has been happening with regard to the menace of kidnapping. Well, the case in point, Delta and its neighboring state, Edo State, and the talk about death penalty and how, the Assembly has actually been, embroiled in some controversy with some people and rights groups. Join us to look at that this morning. The menace of kidnapping is Victor Chase, the Speaker, Delta State House of Assembly. Good morning.
Thank you, Sman. Good morning.
Well, let's start by looking at this. Just recently the secret agencies had a big catch when it comes to kidnapping of one of those alleged to be a kingpin in kidnapping in that particular region. How deep is the problem of kidnapping in Delta State and the South region?
Well, let me start by, first of all, thanking you. Kidnapping in the South region started, I remember clearly that it started seriously from Akwa Ibom, where it was to kidnap people and hold them for upwards of 6 months and all of that. And they fought it, using the security agencies, and it was like cascading down towards Delta Cross. Now it went to Abia State, which is a neighboring state with Akwa Ibom. It became very serious with the advent of what's the name now, one OCC something that was killed by the military. And of course it cooled down. It came down to Anambra State and of course Delta. In Delta, it became very serious at some point. You also had River State, where they had started it up with the militancy, taking hostages of expatriate workers, which eventually became an issue into full-blown kidnapping, where they now kidnap our own nationals. Before it used to be just the expatriates. And of course it came down to Delta, and Delta had its own peculiar situation where you had expatriate workers, you had those in the oil industry offshore, and then you also had those happening right there on ground. And for a while it was a problem. And Delta State government, on his own part, led by the governor, the executive arm, of course, they had to fight the situation. And how did they do this? Security agencies, the SSS, the police, were working hand in hand. At the time, we had an issue where even part of the security agencies were compromised, and it became difficult now to actually center on those who were involved in the kidnapping menace. But with time, that also had to be dealt with. There was shake-ups here and there, and of course, some of the agencies they had to do a lot more on intelligence and getting to the root of where the kingpins were. Of course, the House, the legislative arm, also had to play its own role by coming up with a law to ensure that kidnapping menace was stemmed and kept out of the state.
Yeah, and talking about the law, we saw the controversy that was brewing sort of between the State House of Assembly and the executive arm of government in Delta State. I mean, you had a case where the governor doesn't believe in death penalty and has made it very clear, and National Assembly, State House of Assembly had passed a law that recommended death penalty for kidnappers. How are you able to resolve that logjam?
There are constitutional provisions, and there's clearly separation of powers. The executive governor does not believe that killing the culprits will stem the tide. Well, first is a medical doctor. He was sworn to a Hippocratic oath that he wouldn't take life, and he believes if the judge sentences you to death, they should kill you. It's not his business. He doesn't have to sign the warrants because he doesn't want to sign. Not many governors believe in it, but that's his opinion, and he believes there are other ways to tackle it. But the House of Assembly making the law also believes that these people, you need to put them to death to serve as a deterrent. Because the simple logic, if you tell a child today who is maybe 14, 16, say, come and be an armed robber, he's most likely not to agree, because he knows that the penalty is death if he's caught. But if you tell a child at 16, say, come, let's put your uncle, we'll hold him hostage, you'll give us money. He will likely agree because he doesn't see anything wrong with it. You'll give money. Worst case scenario, if he's caught, his uncle will tell them he's his brother and that's it. But we've seen all of this play out.
But you talked about Akwa Ibom and Abia State,
Yeah.
who fought this kidnapping
Yes.
trend to a standstill,
Yes.
and someone like ended it. Don't you think that? Did you think about taking that route?
Yeah, Akwa Ibom also have the law. They passed the law.
But
Capital punishment.
was that before they stemmed kidnapping, or after it had moved on to the other
No,
part?
before it was stemmed.
Now, do you actually think?
Yes.
Because I know there are a lot of arguments against the death penalty being a deterrent.
Yes.
Is that what would stop kidnapping? Because even though it's been signed into law, it doesn't look as if it's stopped. It's still there.
In Delta, you don't have kidnapping as an issue anymore. You have more of it in Edo, so you just have the wind coming towards Delta. They go take them in Edo, maybe
And store them
have
in Delta.
hideouts in Delta, but we've also unearthed their positions now.
It's really hard for someone to get some people convinced when you say death penalty can actually deter people from committing such heinous crime. But because even we understand there is also death penalty for those convicted of armed robbery and those that have actually killed in the course of robbing people, which is also the argument of some people concerning this particular law you have chosen to pass. That hasn't deterred people. We still, there was already this law before the kingpin Kevin was caught, and I think he was also caught in Delta State.
Yes, he was caught in Delta.
How do you marry that? Because it doesn't really look pretty nice that, well, it has been able to deter people. And for those who argue against this, they say in modern day you have actually nothing to do with death penalty, as a whole lot of innocent people have been put to death by such laws.
Well, you see, you cannot completely rid the society of crime. Even if you put death penalty for all crimes, you still have those crimes happen. That's the truth. But whether it serves as a deterrent, yes, it does serve as a deterrent. Because if you're put to death, you know the consequences of the business you're about to engage in. And if you're caught, you know that the penalty is death. So you're making a choice at that point. It's either I go for it and go for the books, I succeed, or I die. And so,
were you, when I mean said you,
Yes.
I'm talking about the lawmakers
Yes.
and some big politicians in your state, were they scared? That was why they had to put this, because it doesn't really look like something that will impact on the people. When you talk about lawmaking, one would have thought there are other serious issues for the people of Delta State for you to pass into law to help them live a better life than this kidnapping. Was it for the elite?
Section 14 of the Constitution says the primary responsibility of government is for the welfare and security of the people. Therefore, if Section 47, which empowers the House of Assembly to pass laws for peace, order, and good governance, is to come into force, then I need to also ensure that the security and welfare of Deltans is primary. And kidnapping is a security issue.
If I'm becoming here, have you noticed that the people, let's just say, not as though we're advocating for the kidnappers, but have you noticed the kind of people that are kidnapped? They go for the politicians, they go for the money bags, so to speak. They don't go for the average people on the street.
That's because you hear only of the money bags. Those are the big people you hear of. There are others on the streets that are taking. And for as low as 100,000, some recharge cards.
Okay, now, I know that there are a lot of people who are fighting against this death penalty, capital punishment. Now, they're also saying that what is needed, basically, making the police or the security agencies more effective with equipment and all of that, wouldn't that be a better path to take?
It's all encompassing. The fact that you're passing the law does not take away the fact that you must also equip the police with equipment, up-to-date equipment to track these criminals. But putting the law in place just goes the extra mile to ensure that there's a deterrent. It's not just the death penalty that's in the law. People center more on the death penalty.
Let's look at the other things in the law. What are the other things in the law?
We made it so that if you're a landlord and you own a house where kidnappers are found to use as a home where they keep their hostages, you lose that property. They'll destroy that property and it belongs to government from that day onward. So in effect, we're trying to make security and everybody's issue. So if I own a house or if I live within the confines of a compound where you have my tenants are criminals and they bring in, you see very funny, it's easy to point out funny characters when you live with them. Yes, the criminals live with us. Just that we are trying to say, well, it's not my business and all of that. So they don't go to talk about it. So we made it as a law that if you have a house like that where you have tenants, you must be able to know the kind of tenants that you have. So if one is a criminal and keeps hostages in your house, you're going to lose that house. We also made it in the communities that the town unions, the traditional rulers, as custodians of their community, will also ensure that the residents of that community report any form of crime or where they suspect persons who are not. If you live in a community and you see a strange face, you're going to know that this person is new. And where is he coming from? What does he do? Those are questions that must come up. And so security is not just for the police or the security agencies, it's for everybody.